hold up, I am on my way, I'm in motion. Let's go to the ocean. Yeah, let's go outside.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is April and today I'm gonna show you 7 DIYs you can make out of one sweater. This is a sweater I'll be using. You can just recycle an old one you have at home or go thrifting for a cheap one. The first thing I knew I wanted to make were some cozy socks from the sleeves. The bottom of the sleeves will be the top of the socks since the cuffs have that nice finished look, and then I rounded out the other end for the toes. I sewed the socks with a zigzag stitch to keep the knit material from unraveling. Then trim the edges as close to the zigzag stitching as you can, and that's pretty much it. You can embellish your socks or embroider cute words on them, but I decided to just leave mine plain. Next up, I want to make a beanie. I'm sure some of you have seen these DIYs before, but I hope you still enjoy seeing my take on it. Since the sweater is 2 different textures in the front and back, I folded the front in half and will be using the textured side for the beanie. I just winged it with the shape of my beanie, but also used one I had at home to make sure it was a similar size, then cut it out. Using the leftover scraps from the sleeves, I decided I would add some cat ears to my beanie. So I sewed 2 triangles and left the bottom open. Then using some of the scraps, I stuffed them up a little to give them some shape. Place the ears facing down and sandwich them in between the 2 hat layers and sew all the way around. Since I had some sequins trim at home, I thought I'd have some fun and outline the ears to make them stand out more. You can hand sew it down if you want to, but I just decided to use hot glue. Here is the finished beanie. I actually ended up folding the bottom edge of the beanie and hemmed it because it was still too long and almost covering my eyes. Also, I decided to add some elastic inside so that it hugs my head more. This is how much material I had to work with next, so I folded the back side of the sweater in half and decided to make some mittens. There wasn't enough room for the thumbs, so I'll just be sewing a separate piece for them. First, trace a shape that will fit around your 4 fingers and cut it out. Next, I marked on the mittens where the thumb is. Then trace out your thumb onto the sweater and cut it out, and always remember to add seam allowance so they fit properly. If you're wondering about my rotary cutting blade, I currently have my pinking blade on just because I haven't changed it back, and it doesn't really make any difference to this knit material, so just use whatever cutting tool you have at home. Now you can sew the mittens all the way around except for the thumb openings. And go ahead and sew the thumb pieces together as well. So here I was zigzag stitching around the very edge, which I realized later was what was causing the rippled seam look. I think what works best is to give yourself enough seam allowance so you're not sewing along the very edge, like how I'm doing here with the thumb pieces. Notice how the mitten seam is rippling, but for the thumb, I just trimmed away the extra material as close to the stitching as possible, and it's laying flat. Just wanted to share that with you guys before you try it out for yourself. And as always, if you guys have a better way to resew knit materials, let us know down in the comments because I always appreciate learning more from you guys. Lastly, face the thumb pieces right sides together to the mitten and sew them together. Overall, I love how the separate thumb piece for the mittens look and fit compared to just sewing one full mitten. So this is how much sweater I have left to work with, and the next DIY I decided on was a sleeping eye mask. You can just trace an eye mask you have at home, but it's really not that hard to just draw out your own because the shape is really simple. The back side is going to be the plain side of the sweater, and the front of the mask I cut it out so the print is going across horizontally. This is totally up to you guys though, depending on where you want to cut out your pieces and if you want to save room for other things you want to make. I also decided to add a layer of black felt so no light shines through, and because I had it at home, so why not? Face the eye mask right sides together and then sew all the way around, but leave an opening at the top to turn it inside out. When the seam is going to be inside and it doesn't need any stretch to the material, I just sew it with a straight stitch instead of a zigzag stitch. For the beanie and mittens and socks, I sewed it with a zigzag stitch to keep the sweater from unraveling, but for something like this, a straight stitch is fine. Turn the eye mask inside out and top stitch the opening closed. To finish the eye mask, I found some really fun glitter elastic from my craft store, and we'll be sewing 2 rows that will fit snug around my head. Stitch them down at the sides of the eye mask with a zigzag stitch. And then using the sequins trim again, I glued on some sleeping eyes. And there you have it, a stylish eye mask for nap time. With what's left of the sweater now, I decided I would make a Christmas tree ornament. Cut out 2 Christmas trees from the sweater, face them right sides together, and sew around all the edges, but leave the bottom opening so you can stuff it up. Turn the tree inside out and poke out the corners. Then stuff it using the scraps. Next, grab a ribbon or string and glue it to the back, and you can cover up the raw edges with some felt. And again, I added some sequins around the edges to make it sparkle. There you have it, a nice cozy ornament for your tree. As there's less and less material to work with, it got harder to think of what to make. So I thought I'd make a bow that you can use as a headband or for another ornament. Cut out 2 rectangle shapes and sew around all the edges, but leave a small opening to turn it inside out. Then cut out 2 smaller rectangle strips for the middle of the bow. Turn it inside out and then wrap it around the center of the bow and sew the end closed. Afterwards, turn the middle piece over so that the raw edges are underneath, and that's pretty much it. You can now slide it on a headband or loop a string through it to use as an ornament. Now I really just have scraps to work with and was just gonna toss them, but decided I could make a little sweater for a Barbie. I sewed together enough pieces to make a Batwing sweater. After cutting out a little batwing sweater, I sewed together more pieces to cut out the same shape for the backside. Then sew the sweater together along the shoulder sleeve and underarm seam. Turn the sweater inside out, and using the neckband, I sewed it along the bottom for a finished look. This is actually one of the Barbies I used to play with as a kid, so her hair is kind of messy because I just pulled her out of the box so she can model the sweater. And now I really only have tiny pieces of scraps that I have no idea what to use for, so I sewed together another Christmas tree since I only had green felt at home and stuffed all the scraps inside. This is a great way to not waste any scraps after you finish your project. I was just sticking my pins in to decorate it for fun, but it actually works great as a pin cushion to have around your sewing room. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and try some of these DIYs out. Even better, I challenge you to see how many things you can make from your sweater. As usual, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more DIYs, and I'll see you next time. Bye!